All right. Hey everyone, here I am Naz. I'm the senior product manager at Clipboard Health now. I just left Bunny Foundation. Uh, but I've been talking about no code with a lot of no code founders, been in the no code space for a while, big fan of Bubble. But quite recently, we did a webinar on no code tools, and we had a lot of product managers in that group and a lot of other people like engineers. And they were asking this one question that, how do we use no code tools inside the company itself, not to build something of our own like a startup, but helping engineers, helping developers inside the company, because there are a lot of tools that engineers don't want to build because they want to focus on the core product. And I think when we were having that conversation, we came across a few tools, and one of the tools made in Bharat is what Nikhil's team has built. It's called Appsmith. It's an internal tool builder, and I'll let Nikhil introduce himself. What Appsmith is, where it comes from, and that's probably my first question to you, Nikhil. Like, first of all, where are you coming from? Why did you start Appsmith, and why Appsmith? Why an internal tool builder?
Okay, cool. Thanks, Naz. So I'm Nikhil. I'm the product manager at Appsmith and also one of its founders. I've pretty much been a developer for most of my professional career. I started out building mobile apps. I've built some apps like Yata.com, Flipkart, and more recently CureFit. And kind of like through my entire journey, the one thing that I always saw, irrespective of the company I went to, was that there was always a need for internal tools. Internal tools was sort of like something that just ran the backbone of every company. And I always wondered that if all of these tools are kind of similar, if every company has like an offer management console, if every company has like a product catalog console, why can't this be productized? Why can't this just be like a simple cookie cutter SaaS version? And just kind of like looking at that, digging deeper, we realized that internal tools kind of had to be custom based on the company, because every company had different data sets. The way they modeled their data was different. The way they performed their own individual workflows was different. And just because of that, every internal tool kind of had to be custom made. And that was kind of like the core problem that we saw. And then basically, as low code, no code was kind of rising, we thought to ourselves like, hey, why isn't there like a really good no code, low code tool just to kind of help you build internal tools? Primarily because we saw a couple of challenges in the space. One was that internal tools took a good amount of engineering effort to build. And as you know, like engineering effort is very, very expensive, right? The other problem was that internal tools required a lot of iteration, because as your businesses keep evolving, your tool has to evolve. If you're a food delivery startup, the day you decide to move into subscriptions, automatically your entire, the look and feel of your customer support dashboard has to change. The way you run your offers has to change. So with every single move you make as a business, your internal tool had to change. And all of these iterations eventually led to you kind of slowing down on the product side, on your consumer facing product side, because you don't have enough dev bandwidth to kind of manage both of them at the same time. And the third problem we kind of encountered was, I would say that these tools, over a bunch of iterations, they start to look really terrible. I mean, like, it's really horrendous to actually work with one of them. They're super confusing. The UX is pretty poor. And overall, we found that the purpose of the tool was to kind of enable a business user to use the tool without needing a developer's help. But eventually, the tool got so confusing, the business users would go back to the developers and say, hey, how do I do this on this tool? How do I use this part of the tool? And that kind of defeated the purpose overall. So that's kind of why we decided to build Appsmith. We really wanted to kind of solve the problem of internal tools and make it really easy for engineers to build them without having to spend too much engineering effort.
Awesome, dude. And like, since you're talking about that, one more question that comes up to my mind, especially about internal tools, and especially because you're product manager, is that at what point uh, do internal tools make into the core sprint for the engineers? And at what point should you actually, make the buy versus build decision for internal tools? Like, should I be using AppSmith or let's say even Google Sheets right now, or should I be actually be building something core in the company for this scenario? So like, when does that transition happen? How do you define that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Naz. Like, I think we firmly believe that all internal workflows should start off with a simple spreadsheet. primarily because in the early days, your workflows aren't set in stone. They're constantly evolving, and you yourself are trying to figure out like how should my operations actually be run. But at a certain scale, you eventually realize that developers are getting pulled into doing tasks that are very manual in nature, and that their time can better be spent elsewhere. And that's when you really want them to kind of automate it. The first step of automation is usually let's just write a simple script over here. But that usually leads to a lot of faulty errors. You end up having incorrect refunds going out. You end up having incorrect offers being issued. So then you say that, okay, hey, it's time to kind of productize this and enable our business users to kind of interact with our systems in a very safe and secure manner. And that's when internal tool building really like sort of begins.
Oops, I was on mute. So a lot of people don't know, but Appsmith has gone open source, and that's very few companies in the no code space actually decide to go open source, because that's actually the core of what makes an internal tool a no code tool stand out. So that's why what I wanted to understand was, why did you go open source, especially in a market where keeping your code with you is going to give you a competitive advantage? And then adding on to that is like, have you actually built something on your own hosted solution that will give you that advantage over your open source tool?
Right. Yeah. I think when we look back at why we started out, right, Naz, we looked at the market and we said that the unfortunate part about this market is that it's such a great technology, but it's just so inaccessible to developers today. At the end of the day, we saw that, irrespective of whether it was no code or low code, uh, it would be the product managers who would pawn off the engineering task with the no code tool to the developers, at the end of the day. And unfortunately, the developer would have to end up using a tool that wasn't built for him. It was built for, a business user or a product manager. And developers, face the brunt of a tool that wasn't designed purely for developers. So we kind of started out in that sense, that we wanted to make a tool that developers would really love and, would kind of empower them to up their skill set, right? And when we look back at our decisions, we kind of decided that if we really want to make this accessible, if we really want to sort of empower developers to build tools much faster, then open source just kind of became a no-brainer. Because I mean, you probably can't think of a very good proprietary coding language that really changed the world, right? Code has always been traditionally democratized and allowed to kind of be learned by anybody and used by anybody. And we believe that no code, I mean, low code should be no different. It should be the same and empower you just as much as code does.
So how do you actually make the sale to developers? Because this is the biggest problem that everyone in the no code space has had, is that whenever you talk about no code to devs, they're like, oh, it's not scalable, we hate it, no code's never going to survive. And you're actually selling no code to developers. So how are you making that sale?
Right. The way that we see it is that we don't take away code. That's like one of the fundamental principles of Appsmith, which I'll show you a little bit later on. But we just don't. We make sure that we don't take away code, but instead we kind of try to modularize it and make sense of it. Because code is like a very long story with a bunch of written lines, which becomes very difficult to kind of visualize and understand when you're looking back at it. Say 6 months from today, right? But the way we kind of deal with it is by kind of breaking up code into different modular blocks, adding a very simple visual layer on those modular blocks so that it becomes easy to configure. But the minute you kind of want to do something like, writing logic, creating workflows, that's when we allow you to like go down to the code level and hack your way through. Because that's the best part about development. Developers don't really enjoy doing the very basic configuration work. What they really enjoy is kind of, working with logic, working with data, kind of building beautiful things. And Appsmith has kind of been geared towards that. We've kind of been geared towards making it really easy for developers to get all the boring menial tasks out of the way, things like just configuring your APIs or building your UI, but kind of empowering you to do all the fun logical things, like saying that hey, this refund button shouldn't show up if this order is already been placed, or this workflow should be triggered if the user is in this particular state. So that's where we kind of like add the fun of development into the entire low code platform.
Awesome. So then let's just get into it. So like, what are the kind of tools that we can actually build with Appsmith? And I know that you're going to show us one tool that you're going to build with Appsmith right now. But before that, like, do you have a list of things that we can build with Appsmith?
Yeah, so Appsmith is really great for most internal tools. Things like your customer support dashboards, CRMs. If you're trying to build like a small CMS for your blog, for if you have generally like a product configuration manager. A lot of teams have configuration managers to allow you to configure, the timeouts on their mobile apps, certain messaging on their products, so that they don't have to do a redeployment, and all of these, and basically even simple admin panels over your, over your database. These are like all really good use cases for Appsmith, where you kind of need a simple CRUD application on top of your database, and you want it to be deployed without too much hassle. I think those are like the best use cases of Appsmith.
So let's actually get into it and show us how we can do it.
Okay,
So what are you
sure.
going to build?
Okay, cool. So I think we ran a poll, and what came out from it was that people really wanted to see a customer support dashboard being built. So I'm going to do that today on Appsmith. And so one of the things that we did really differently, Naz, was we became a very on-prem first solution. Most tools out there, if you have to go on-prem, you have to like contact their support. You need like some kind of technical support to sit with you while you deploy it on your own instance. But we decided that Appsmith had to be like really accessible, like had to be like insanely easy to deploy this on your own. So I'm going to actually show you how you can deploy Appsmith and also like build a tool on it today. So let me just share my screen. So this is our repo. And
So while
yeah, Nas.
no, go ahead. I'll ask my question later.
Okay. This is our GitHub repo. And to basically deploy Appsmith, you can just use Docker. It's a very simple way to get started. You just have to curl our script. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And now, once I have this install script here, I just need to run this install script. Appsmith uses like a MongoDB underneath the hood. So you need to create like a Mongo instance, but the script does it for you automatically. And even if you have your own custom domain that you want to host Appsmith on, we'll automatically take care of that for you as well. But since I'm running it locally, I'm going to skip that step.
And people who don't run it on the terminal, they can still get Docker desktop, right? And
Yeah,
then
they can
run
get
it right there.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Like, in the span of having this conversation, like Appsmith is pretty much ready to go. And it's already running on my local over here. So that pretty much got Appsmith like up and running on your local. It's literally that easy for devs to check it out today, So this is our local version. I'm going to be building on a cloud version because it has this slightly more cutting edge features. And
that was pretty impressive in terms of deployment, because every time I try to clone a GitHub repo and try to run it, even if it's on Docker, like there are like 10 dependencies that don't work. So
yeah,
this is kind of impressive.
Yeah, we found the same thing, and honestly, this only came about after like weeks of iteration on different systems, different containers. Like there was always that one edge case that was missing out, but we just kept at it until like we got it really really smooth for people to get deployed. Cool. So this is the app we're going to be building today. It's a simple customer support dashboard. The idea being that if you're a company like, let's say, Big Basket, you generally have tickets, customer support tickets coming in from Freshdesk. And the customers are generally complaining about how their payment failed or how they want to update some information on the app, and they're just not able to do it, right? So as a customer support executive, you generally want like a simple view of your Freshdesk tickets. You want to be able to check out like what customers are saying to you. And you also want to be able to actually interact with the user data. So taking this person over here who had a failed payment, you probably want to go and look at the user information, right? So you can just see some user information here. So all of this is just dummy data that are pre-filled from our database. And basically, you could also possibly update the user's information. So you might want to, let's say, update the person's name over here. Or you might actually want to check out his order history, right? And because he had like a failed payment, we might also just want to go ahead and refund his order, right? And all of this is kind of connected to both our Freshdesk as well as our Razorpay. So initiating a refund over here, let's say you want to confirm this refund. So initiating a refund over here actually goes ahead and refunds the order in our Razorpay dashboard as well, right over here. So all of this is actually live data that's been set up and that's working. And typically this would take you a couple of days, if not weeks of engineering effort. But I'm going to show you how it's pretty simple to get this up and running on Appsmith today. So to get started, this is what the applications look like on Appsmith. It's really simple to just get started with like a new customer support app. I think I already have skeleton set up. Right. So we'll be using a customer support 2 app. And so what we looked at was at the beginning was how to kind of pull in data through Freshdesk, right? So one of the main problems that people have, building internal tools is actually how do I get the data? Because you have to write a lot of AJAX calls or HTTP requests and deal with a lot of asynchronous threading and stuff like that just to get the data into your system. On top of which you also have to deal with Freshdesk APIs and things like that, right? So Appsmith kind of smoothens out the entire process by kind of segregating different parts of the application. So UI building is called the widget section. APIs are where we're going to actually create like a Freshdesk API. And being so geared towards developers, right? What we've done is we've kind of enabled it so that you can just import an API using curl. Because when you look at something like Freshdesk, so these are all of our Freshdesk tickets right now. But Freshdesk exposes really nice APIs that you can use, but you need to figure out the format in which they have to be configured. And one good thing is that because you're a developer, you generally understand something like curl, right? And Freshdesk also exposes like a simple curl interface that you can copy. So I'm just going to copy this here. And I'm going to use my separate API keys for this. And I need to update the domain as well. And with something as simple as that, your entire API kind of gets configured. So we can call this as like get tickets. And here, Naz, this is basically a very simple REST interface. This is something that developers are very familiar with. You would have seen this on Insomnia or Postman. This kind of allows you to interact with an API call, but traditionally this has only been used to kind of test. It's always been used as a testing suite. What we decided is that we're going to use the same paradigm, but actually bring that into the development process.
So, for example, let's say just like in Postman, I can set up variables for like a global variable for your authorization. Can you do that in Appsmith as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you can do is, let's say that for every Appsmith help.freshdesk.com, you have certain variables you want to configure, right? So you can just go ahead and set that as a data source over here. You can create a new data source and you can set certain global variables for that data source. With every HTTP call, automatically this data source gets sent.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So just as easily, we were able to actually pull the data in Freshdesk. But the second problem we need is to actually display this data on the UI, right? And typically, if you're a backend developer, this is kind of like something very frustrating dealing with HTML, CSS. But we make it really easy. We have like a bunch of widgets over here that you can just drag and drop easily on the screen. You can resize them, make them fit your own needs. And then you kind of want to connect this to your data. And this is where the real magic happens, Naz. This is what we kind of built, which is the JavaScript engine underneath the hood. So over here, what we do is everything inside this mustache kind of takes you into code mode. And this is where you can kind of access JavaScript. So if you remember, we named our Freshdesk API as get tickets. And here I can just access get tickets dot data. And automatically all the ticket data starts showing up over here, right? Now, unfortunately, most APIs, they don't play too well because their data formats are, all over the place. APIs have data formats for a variety of reasons, like optimization, multiple downstream services using them, but it doesn't work so well for the UI, right? And that's where Appsmith really
Yeah.
comes in handy. Like you can just transform this data by running it over
Like
a map
one I've
function.
seen is like Pocket API is when you try to pull out a list of Pocket articles, they just come as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like there is no structure there.
Yeah.
So you literally have to do 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot. You cannot do an iterative process on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where coding really comes and makes it really easy. That's the part that we didn't want to take away from developers because those are the things that we really love to do, right? So I can just name this like a ticket, and what I can do is running a mapper function over it. I can let's say let's return Oh, sorry, we already done something. Let's call it ID. So let's say ticket.id. And we probably also want to show the subject. So let's say ticket.subject. And let's also show the email of the person. Okay, so the email of the person doesn't come automatically for Freshdesk. What they require you to do is actually um, pass an include parameter here. So I can add requester, comma, description. So I think this should, right. So now we're actually getting the description information and the requester information as well. And all of this kind of gets updated in real time over here. So as I'm kind of showing you, let's say the email over here, you can see that this instantly gets, it's the requester email. Yeah, you can see that it instantly kind of gets updated. And this is another core problem of programming, right? Which is you write the code, then you have to kind of compile it, run it, then check out how whether it's working in the UI. And if there's a bug, you kind of have to, add a debug point somewhere and stop the entire process to see what's going wrong. But Appsmith kind of brings you into like a live coding environment. So as you're working with the data, you know exactly what's going wrong. You know where you've made a mistake. You can just clearly see data errors coming in, and all of that is just really easy to correct on the spot.
And how do you manage anything like a runtime error that would come in?
Yeah. So what Appsmith does is it's very safely handles runtime errors. Like for example, this right. This is actually
Yep.
invalid JavaScript. So what it's telling me is that hey, this value does not evaluate to type array of object, right? Please use JavaScript to kind of transform it the right way. So Appsmith just kind of wraps all errors and gives it to you in a very pretty format so that you know that hey, there's something going wrong over here, and now I can kind of react to it and deal with it. Great. So now we have basically all the information we need. But one thing you can notice is that, okay, the description is coming as HTML, which is generally something that happens with some APIs, right? But fortunately, you can deal with that pretty easily with Appsmith as well. What we can do is we can just go ahead and drag a container. And let's also add a simple text box. And now we want to kind of show the data that's there inside this table in this text box, right? So let's create a simple flow so that whenever you select a fresh test ticket, it shows you what the email of that ticket was. So we can just go ahead. Okay, I haven't named my table. So let's name our table first. Let's call it ticket table. And here we can just say ticket table dot selected row dot description, right? So now whenever I select a row here, automatically the description is getting updated. And the best part is we handle HTML as well. And now you don't really have to worry about like, those last mile fixes. A lot of times you'll see that, oh, this text is getting truncated. It's not showing the right way on this device. All those things become really simple because you can just drag things around. You can just change the settings and you don't have to think about like, how is this going to look on a different device? How is this kind of going to work once I finish compilation? Because everything is like extremely real time over here.
But then how do you manage responsiveness in the UI itself?
Right. So right now we don't manage responsiveness, but that's something that's coming up soon. What we're going to do is basically allow you to kind of basically we're going to define a set of rules that say that beyond certain breakpoints, we'll kind of resize the application. But above those breakpoints, what we're going to do is we're going to actually reflow the entire state so that it kind of looks really great on mobile phones. So that's something that's going to come up pretty soon.
Oh, that will actually be great because what I've seen with a lot of no-code tools, even the no-code tools which are supposed to be great with UI work, is that they handle responsiveness really badly. Like Bubble is a classic case of it takes you twice the time of making something responsive in Bubble than it actually takes you to build that thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. Responsiveness is a pretty tricky problem to solve. It's one of the problems that I think coding has done better at than visual programming. But
Yeah.
I think that with a little bit of work, we can definitely get there.
All
Okay,
right.
cool.
Looking forward to that.
So now that we have, all this ticket data, the next thing you want to do is actually look at this user information, right? Like this user has complained about something, clearly having some grief. So we kind of want to drill down into this user data, right? So what we can do is basically on click, so on click is a simple action that you can perform on buttons. And different widgets have different actions that you can perform. So for example, a table has something like an on row selected or an on page change, whereas like a button has a very simple on click listener, right? And all of these actions can basically be configured to something that's very generic. Like you can call an API, you can navigate to a page, you can show a modal. All of these things can kind of be created with just a few clicks rather than having to write a lot of code in it. So here we kind of just want to navigate to a page. We can navigate to a users page. So we have a page called users page. And what we can do is now pass some user data to that page. So let's just pass the email field, because typically this data isn't correlated. Like Freshdesk is not going to have your database information. So you're going to have to sort of correlate the email ID in your database to what Freshdesk is sending you. So here I'm going to use the tickets table dot selected row, and I'm going to pass the email parameter. And just like that, you can see that the email parameter got added to the query param over here. And that's the real power of Appsmith, something that we've done very differently, which is that we've actually created multi-page applications. A lot of tools only deal with single-page applications today, but we're one of the few who really focus on multi-page workflows so that you can actually pass data between different pages.
So even for the uh, code that Appsmith, which is very local to Appsmith, right? Like the navigate to function. So do you have documentation that is shown inline or any error that's shown inline? So because you would know JavaScript, but you would not know Appsmith functions, right? So how do you handle that?
Right. So a lot of it is kind of handled through our autocomplete, which makes things super, super simple. So as soon as you do this, you can kind of more or less go through all of the list of functions that we support in JavaScript today, as well as some of our custom functions. So something like, for example, close modal, you have like an instant autocomplete for it, which tells you what's going on underneath the hood. So our entire application kind of deals with the current state of your app and exposes what you can do and what's going wrong with your current state. Cool. So now we probably want to pull some user data from our application. And this is a really cool feature of Appsmith NAS, which is that you don't necessarily have to deal with APIs all the time. Sometimes you just kind of have data in your database and you want to pull that directly into your UI, right? So what we've gone and done is I've already created a mock data source. So this is just a simple Postgres DB that we have. We also support a bunch of other databases like Mongo and MySQL as well. So you can connect with them as well. And what we're going to do today is something pretty interesting. We're just going to go ahead and query Postgres directly from this UI. So this query over here is just going to pull data live from our database without having to write a single API. So now internal tool iterations becomes insanely fast because you no longer have to invest time in setting up a backend. You don't need to invest in infrastructure deploying that backend. You can just query your database right from this console. So let's go ahead and call this get users. And here, similarly, we can just say get users.data. And just like that, we have all the data showing up. You can hide a couple of these. They don't matter too much now. Great. So now that we have the users over here, one common problem that we see is that, obviously I've just queried for 10 users here, but typically users are in the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands, right? And the UI typically can't handle that kind of data. You'll end up crashing, you'll end up having a lot of lag. And what we can do from Appsmith is just simply put enable server-side pagination, right? So we kind of follow all of these developer paradigms where you usually would get stuck if you weren't a developer, which you wouldn't really realize that, okay, you can do server-side pagination in Appsmith. And we make it really easy. So on page change, we can just go ahead and call get users. And now what we can do is in our query section for get users, we can just add a simple offset here. So the offset can again come from our table. I think I named the table again. So call this the users table. So we can just say users table dot page number. We can subtract 1 since the page number starts from 1 and our offset starts from 0. You can multiply that by 10. And just as we're writing all of this, right, if you'll notice on the side, we have like an evaluated value. So we always know exactly what this query is actually going to execute. We're never playing a guessing game as to what's going to happen with the application after I actually run this. You know exactly what's going to happen. And just like that, our action runs successfully. And now we can iterate through our list of data over here. Another thing you'll notice is that as we're working and building this application, at no point in time am I like, writing the code and then, clicking on a deployment or a preview and then checking out, does it work or not? I'm actually interacting with the widgets as I work with them, right? That gives you like a very powerful real-time experience to kind of iterate insanely fast. And to, let's say, go over all of these widgets, all of these users, we probably also want to kind of search for a user, right? And that's why we pass the email at the top. So what we can do is we can say appsmith.url.email, query params.email. And whatever parameter was passed before, that kind of shows up over here to kind of filter all of that email information. And now this is currently searching the email locally, but what we probably want to do is actually search it inside our query. So we can just add a where clause. We can say where our email is like, and what we can do is we can take it, we can bind it from the table. So we can say search text. Yeah, and just like that, our where clause is also updated. So now we can actually search for a person's email as well over here, right? So now just going back to our previous page, what you'll notice is that if we are trying to drill down for a particular user, we can actually see that that user's information is getting populated over here inside this tree itself, right? And that's like something that's really powerful. So one thing we need to add is also that on search change, we need to go ahead and execute this get users query again. So that when we say Bob, Bob's data also starts showing up over here. And now typically tables are good for like a bit of information, but you want to drill down and also, see more information about this user, right? So something like, for example, today we can't see the user's image. So we can just simply drag an image component over here. And we can say users table dot selected row. And we can use the avatar field. So that when I select this user, I'm actually able to see his image as well.
So do you also envision this being used by BI people for building dashboards for exec?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the type of dashboards we envision are sort of very simplistic dashboards, which sort of give you an overview of the data, but we don't envision too much BI in the sense, because BI requires a lot of slicing and dicing of data. You need to,
Yeah.
have the ability to kind of merge different data sets and perform a lot of analysis on top of it. And for that, like better tools would probably be things like Tableau or Metabase, I would say.
And I think there was a similar question that someone had asked, any tools for building simple data science models resembling the interface Alteryx offers? And if you've seen Alteryx, they generally have like a drag and drop builder where you can do data preparation, you can do data blending, and do all of those data functions. So what you're saying is those data functions are not so comprehensive on the Appsmith platform, and better to do it on something like Tableau, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Complicated data functions, that wouldn't be the right place for Appsmith. Appsmith is more for places like if you were Swiggy and you were trying to look at, hey, how many of my orders were delayed today? Or in real time, what's the type of delay we are seeing because of rain mode, right? These type of things are really great to visualize on Appsmith because we have like simple charts that will kind of allow you to visualize this data, right? But if you want to really slice and dice your data, then I would prefer a platform like Tableau or, like you mentioned, Data Tricks, I think. Yeah. So I'm just going to show a little bit of user data over here. So we can say this table that's that name. And let's show the user's phone number as well. And as you can see right now, we're getting an error here because sometimes your data isn't clean. Sometimes you don't have data on the backend, right? And Appsmith lets you like correct these really easily because you're still working with JavaScript. So you can just do this. And now it just tells you what to prefer, whether you want to prefer the data that's actually there or you want to prefer like a default value. And that default value is kind of shown over here, right? And now I think one of the use cases was to kind of be able to update this user's information, like to be able to update, his phone number. So we can just create like a simple edit button. And we probably want to show a modal, right? And in this modal, we can, let's say, display the user's information. So if you notice something here, Naz, it's that I could actually marry the code world along with just the regular static world. So I was able to say edit outside of the code blocks, and then I was able to actually work with the data inside the users table within the code blocks. And that's like one of the things that we allow, which is substitution in place. So you don't necessarily have to write everything in code. You can just pick parts of it that you want. So that maybe tomorrow, a business user might just want to say, hey, can I just edit this small piece of text over here, for example?
Yeah, this is something I can also draw like a parallel from Bubble. So Bubble has something called static data versus dynamic data. So if on a button you want to show both, you can say edit and then say insert dynamic data, and then you can basically get the dynamic data, which you're doing through the mustache in JavaScript, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
And while you're doing this, so there are a few more questions. Like someone asked, is there any substitute for me to write simple Python scripts that can, for example, crawl for a certain piece of information on LinkedIn or on any other website? It's kind of like a web crawler.
Right. A great starting place for that would be AutoCode. AutoCode does a really good job of this, where you can kind of write code. It's sort of like a serverless function, but without all the hassle of setting up like a very complicated Lambda for yourself. You can just very simply write a small snippet, create like a simple cron job through a visual drag and drop, and just kind of fire that cron job to execute the script.
And if you want to use autocode in a very simple way, there's this website called standard library stdlib.com. And go and sign up there, and you can basically host your code there and set up everything. And there's another question like, are there any good no-code tools to build custom apps on or for Salesforce? And I'm thinking that maybe some functions of Salesforce can even be set up on Appsmith, right? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. So one thing great about Salesforce is that they provide you with really, really good APIs. That was kind of like their entire differentiator on the market, which is that you can build like a ton of applications over Salesforce. And even today, we have seen like a lot of public companies come out from building apps on top of Salesforce, right? So it becomes really easy to build workflows on top of Salesforce from Appsmith as well, because Salesforce gives you all of the APIs out of the box.
And we are hoping that pretty soon you'll also have a data source for Salesforce so that people can set it up here.
Yeah, so we definitely will have a data source for Salesforce, but the awesome thing is that Salesforce gives you REST APIs also, so you can just use our REST API interface and just go ahead today as well.
That is true. Actually, that's true for almost everyone, right? Like everyone has a REST API infrastructure in place these days.
Yeah, I'm just going to update the user's name over here using the names input and using the phone number.
By the way, while Nikhil is doing it, anyone else, if you have more questions, we're going to address them. I know there's a question by Prohit, and I'm going to wait till the end to answer that because it's a general no-code question. But if there are any other questions very specific to Appsmith or internal tools, please go ahead and type them out. Or any other no-code questions, like we'll take them all.
Okay,
So
so I'm just
someone
waiting.
asked,
Yeah.
so Appsmith can help me merge my MailChimp and Salesforce data and create a two-way bridge.
Uh, so Appsmith is more for user-facing workflows. So for example, if you had a workflow where you kind of needed to update both your MailChimp and Salesforce data, or you needed to view your MailChimp and Salesforce data, that would be like a great fit for Appsmith. But if you just want these two systems to talk to each other without any human intervention, that's like a much better fit for something like Zapier. Yeah, I think that would probably be like a good analogy. Appsmith works really well when you need a human to kind of come in and make a decision.
And I think, yeah, the really good use case would be that there's a group that I've created on Salesforce that I want to send a campaign to. And the marketing people would be coming to Appsmith and looking at that Salesforce CRM data, selecting all of the users they want to send the campaign to, and send through MailChimp, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be a great use case. So one more thing here, Naz, is that as we've been configuring most widgets today with just like this property pane that allows you to configure things in a very simple form kind of manner. The when things become a little bit more complicated, right? Like over here, what I want to do is I want to first update the user, then I want to go ahead and fetch the new user data, then I want to close this model, then I might even want to like show a success message, for example, right? Now, typically, the way that tools do these things is they kind of give you a very, very long form, or they give you like a very complicated way to manage this form, right? And overall, developers hate stuff like that because they're very keyboard oriented. They love to do things that are, really slick with keyboard shortcuts. And what we've done there is that the second things get a little complicated. We've given you like a very simple way to dig down into the JS world. And that's where the real power of Appsmith comes in, where we kind of allow you to hack the system at any point in time. So the second things get a little complicated, you want to like jump out of this whole visual interface, you can actually start hacking things. So I can just go ahead over here and say that when get users finishes, I want to actually close this modal. And I think this is modal 2. And just like that, I think we should be able to update this user's information now. So yeah, and just like that, now this user has a phone number. So CS teams can actually go ahead and update user details on the fly. And the best part is because we are self-hosted, you can actually deploy us on your own cloud. You never have to worry about where your customer data is going and who kind of have access, who has access to it as well. So the next part of it would be to actually begin to show this user's order information. And now what I'm going to do is every time I click on a row, I'm going to actually populate the orders in the second table. So we've kind of done away with the paradigm that data needs to be sent from place to place and gone with like a more reactive model, which tells you that your views are always driven by the data that they're backed by. So you don't really need to worry about making sure like the data is in sync with this view and the data is in sync with that view. You just have to kind of ensure that the data is present, and once you kind of do that, automatically this entire view gets updated. So we've really made it simple for developers to work with, data sets and views together.
So can I do like some workflow stuff? For example, uh, if I want to send data from Intercom, once you click the approval button, would I be able to do that?
Send data from intercom where?
So for example, let's say that there's an approval flow here, or let's say the refund flow, right? You click on refund, the refund happens, and then Intercom sends a message to the customer saying that, hey, your refund just happened,
Yeah.
right? So it's instant communication right after it happens. So can I do that from Appsmith, or do I need to set up something else?
No, yeah, you're right. That's a perfect example of something that you can actually do on Appsmith today. So let's just take a simple example of a refund button here. Right. And we make it really easy to style these things as well, because the last thing you want to do for internal tools is kind of deal with all the styling, right? Like even though I've hardly paid attention to it, this is like a half decent tool that is visually cognitive. Like it makes sense to a user who's trying to use it. Whereas a lot of the internal tools, if you look at, they just don't make sense. Like you really need like a user guide to actually go ahead and try to use them, right? So yeah, so if let's say that we had to go ahead and trigger an email from SendGrid every time the refund succeeded, right? So what we do is we say, let's go ahead and click, let's refund Razorpay first, because Razorpay has to succeed. And if we know that Razorpay has succeeded, what we can do is also go ahead and create a new API called, let's say for Intercom. So sorry, for SendGrid. So we'll call a send mail API. It's a post request, configure it with, the SendGrid parameters. And basically this API would be in charge of triggering SendGrid's mail API. And now what happens is that every time the email succeeds, it goes out. But every time it fails, I can go ahead and just show a simple message saying, uh, you know, refund failed. Just as simple as that. So that's how like Appsmith can kind of allow you to also like manage all your workflows that users need to trigger.
So basically now I can connect like multiple tools, like look at the response from Razorpay and then send the email. So
Yes.
I think that that's one of the problems I've seen with other no-code tools which are not built for internal tools, is that you can't really wait for, so especially the synchronous tasks, you can't really wait for an API call to finish for your next API call to happen. And
Yes.
that's where you would click the refund button, you send the mail that the refund happened, but then Razorpay says, oh no, that didn't happen. And now your customer success team is in shit.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Okay, I see a few more questions. So, can Appsmith help me build simple customer-facing bots on top of WhatsApp?
Simple customer facing
Bots. So I
bots.
think chatbots.
No, but Appsmith could possibly help you manage those chatbots. So because our UI is independent of a third-party platform. So the point of Appsmith is to kind of have a UI layer over your own database that talks to all of your data sources. Whereas a WhatsApp chatbot would probably be something that configures logic that works with WhatsApp's API. So if you probably need like an interface to configure what the bot should do, some kind of simple rules for the bot that your business users need to configure, then Appsmith will be a great place for that admin panel or internal tool, but not for actually creating the bot per se.
Yeah, I would say like use something like LandBot to create a WhatsApp bot, but then LandBot has these API requests that you can make to Appsmith. And for example, if your bot says, hey, do you want to get a refund? And you say yes, and then it just sends a trigger to Appsmith saying that, hey, this customer wants a refund. What are other use cases you have seen people build in Appsmith? Sid asked that question.
Okay. One really cool thing that we use internally is our configuration manager. So you look at all of this over here, right? All of these widgets over, I mean, all of these configurations for these properties over here. So we kind of experiment a lot with our platform, right? Sometimes we decide that, okay, maybe the default search text we should change the text field, or maybe instead of having visibility as a switch, we should have it as an input box, right? So all of this is actually like in a configuration file that you need to manage. And what we went ahead and did is we just built a very simple configuration application on Appsmith so that whenever we update that configuration, the platform itself changes. So it makes it really easy to like make push updates to your products in real time. That's one cool thing. The second cool thing is that because we do like a lot of regular feedback and appraisals that we really believe in, because feedback is really how you grow even the product as well. So we kind of created a very simple feedback manager so that people could like just hack together a simple form, ask the fields that they really wanted filled, and just make it a public app and share it with their peers so that they could just get that feedback in real time. So a lot of like very interesting, fun cases come up when you give developers the access to kind of build things on their own without like sort of restricting them by a paywall or like a lock-in period or like some kind of usage policy. Yeah, and I think just like that, we have our orders table also configured to show the payment rows. So basically, our refund API is taking in the payment ID from the order, and this is kind of what's going to initiate the refund. And I think there was a user, James. Yeah, I think he had a couple of Razorpay orders. So let's hide some of these. Yeah, so one order is already refunded, and possibly you want to add some simple business logic here, right? It doesn't make sense to refund an order that's already been refunded. So something you can do very simply on Appsmith is say that, hey, let's go ahead and disable this button if it's already refunded. So if the orders tables selected row dot status is equal to refunded, then it's disabled. So just like that, now you can ensure that like no faulty refunds go ahead. So if I'm selecting a order that's been placed, then I can initiate a refund. But if I'm selecting an order that's already refunded, you can't do that anymore. So simple
But if I
validations are
want
very.
to, let's say, change the text of the refund button saying refunded, or change the color and stuff like that, but that we cannot do with Appsmith
Yeah,
right now, right?
you can.
Based on logic.
Yeah, you can. So let's say that you want to change this as refunded, right? So instead of having the static text over there, we just go back to JavaScript. And what we just do is we say orders table dot selected row dot status. And if the status is refunded, what we'll do is we'll actually say refunded. Otherwise, we'll say refund. Simple as that, right? So now the text is also conditional. So based on the status, even your text is changing over here.
And same thing we can do for like things like color or
Yeah, exactly.
any kind of formatting. Okay,
Exactly. You can even make this button disappear if you want over here. So our visibility, we can just go ahead and make the button entirely disappear if we wanted to.
got
So
it.
that's the really cool part. Like you can control pretty much anything. Yeah, and pretty much just like,
So on a few more questions, someone said, I'm managing a CMS and a public community on Discord. Currently, there are a few plugins available to automate some stuff I would like. Is there any hack I can do in Appsmith to fulfill my use case?
yeah, I think it depends on the type of workflow you want to trigger from Appsmith. I think Discord has really great APIs, so you can definitely integrate with Discord. That shouldn't be a problem. And I think if you have a very clear idea of what you want to build and you need some help building it, you should actually join our Discord channel. We're very active over there, and and one of us would definitely be happy to help you out and get your app up and running.
And so one question that I have, and I think everyone has had, is how are you different from Retool, and like what's your advantage over them?
Right.
Because Retool has been there in the market for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Retool has done a great job of building like a low code builder. Some of the things that we kind of force ourselves to do differently were ensuring that we were extremely focused on the developer and making sure that all of his workflows were kind of done in a very coding kind of paradigm, and kind of doing that a lot better than pretty much anybody, even including Retool. For example, in the future, we're actually coming up with a lot more IDE kind of paradigms where our entire UI is going to be looking like an IDE, so that you can actually feel like you're in VS Code rather than like on a very different platform, right? Another thing is that the one thing that we really disliked about all low-code platforms is that there was just no accessibility to developers. When developers are sort of the final people who are using the product, there was just no way that a developer who's not part of a company can just go ahead and sign up for Retool and use it for like his own personal projects or for like an app that he really wants to build quickly. And that's where Appsmith came in, where we wanted to make it extremely accessible for anybody to kind of use us. And how this is going to impact us in the future is we're going to accept a lot of community contribution where database integrations, widgets, all of these things are going to actually be very hackable by the community. So if you as a user kind of want to go ahead and add to the platform, there's a particular widget that's missing for you, you can actually go ahead and do that, which is kind of impossible in any other platform today.
So we have a couple of more minutes. I'll just take off a few questions here. So Sid asked, can you use it for external tools also since there's no paywall?
Yeah,
Basically
absolutely.
replace Typeform or Google Forms.
Yeah, totally. So very simply, what we can do is actually make this app public today. And this URL, I can probably share it in the chat so that anybody can actually check it out.
And also share your Discord channel.
Oh yeah, you can possibly just go to the Appsmith GitHub repo, and all of our information is there. You can contact us on GitHub. You can contact us on Discord. We are pretty much available anywhere. I think the chat is not sure. Okay, yeah, here we go. So this is the app that we just built right now. Opening this up is actually shareable with pretty much anybody, and you can see that it works.
And I'm also going to share the Appsmith GitHub with people here. All right. Great product vision. Are you guys hiring? If yes, for which roles?
Sorry?
Someone needs to know if you guys are hiring and if yes, for which roles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We are hiring for across the board on engineering, both front end and back end. I think growing our engineering team is something that's kind of top of our mind right now. So yeah, if you're really interested in building something like this, then definitely just drop a mail, to me, Nikhil at appsmith.com. Yeah, and we'll get talking.
And so I actually had like a couple of questions before we close. Um, One question I had was like, especially when you went open source, like, what do you think? How do you think the GitHub community is going to contribute? And one of the reasons why you went open source is like, what do you think of the community to be contributing to Appsmith right now?
Yeah, I think we don't honestly expect a lot of contribution right off the bat. The way that we think that contribution is going to start is initially people will talk to us a lot about the type of UX issues they're facing, the type of database integration that we're missing. Some people want Cassandra, some people want DynamoDB, and they'll get the ball moving on the direction in which we kind of need to cover ground. And then I think gradually, as we kind of make it really easy for people to start contributing back, we'll start seeing people writing their own GraphQL plugins. We'll see people writing their own Firebase plugins, people adding their own widgets to the platform. And that's where we really want to be. That's the place where we really want to see the platform evolve to eventually.
So, like, what's the plan for, let's say, making Appsmith sustainable? So, I know you're open source, but is there something on the hosted side that's really, really appealing that I would rather go for a paid product than go for the free open source product?
Right. So today, honestly, we don't even charge for our hosted version. Even our hosted version is 100% free to use. The reason we do this is because the product we're building today is extremely geared towards developers. And we don't want to charge developers for something that should be democratized amongst them. The way we eventually plan on making money is possibly the GitLab model, where when eventually enough number of developers love us, and we see like a lot of people in enterprise saying that they need dedicated support, they kind of need a particular very obscure feature like integrating with their LDAP or some kind of audit logs. That's when we'll actually say that, hey, maybe for some kind of customization and for a sort of superset of features, we'll possibly charge for that version. But for the current community edition and for our hosted version, we are completely free today.
Well, that's actually great. Very few people actually think in that direction, and it's actually a very risky, very bold move. Actually, I won't say risky, but a very bold move trying to go the GitLab direction, because everyone's like, okay, I got some code, I can build internal tools. If people are asking for it, let's charge it. And I'm pretty sure people will put out the money for this, right? Someone asked, did Appsmith go open source to set the data flywheel rolling?
The data flywheel?
Yeah.
Honestly, I would say it's the other way around. Like when you're open source, you're flying in the dark. If you're a SaaS product, you have your user sign up information, you have all your user analytics. But when you're open source, you're kind of flying in the dark because you can't actually have any telemetry on-prem, right? So the way we kind of manage data is largely through community requests, seeing what people are talking about, seeing what people are telling us, and being really mindful about that. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's for the data flywheel. It's more about sort of growing our community, because community is what really matters here.
And so, like, what's like the future plan right now? Well, where are you guys heading? What's on the roadmap? What are you trying to look for?
Right. So our current roadmap is kind of geared towards improving our editor experience and making it like 10x better for developers. I'm actually going to just show you a couple of things that we're coming out with really soon. So this is like what Appsmith will look like very near in the future. This is like how we're gonna kind of reskin the editor, make it a lot more dark mode, because developers really love dark mode. And also we're kind of going to organize things as entities, because that's what basically makes sense for developers. So we're going to double down on this kind of user experience to just make developers really, really go nuts on this platform. And then going forward, we'll also start thinking about things like expanding our entire integration base. We've seen a lot of interest in terms of GraphQL and Firebase. People want like real-time data today, and doubling down on real-time data is going to be like a huge sort of moving needle for us. So that's another thing that's coming up on the roadmap.
All right, and I think there's this last question is more generic in terms of no code from Rohit Manchanda. Is there any platform that's adept at both front-end UI and back-end? I'm currently using Webflow, which is super easy for UI, but doesn't have a great backend. On the other hand, Ghost.org has good open source backend, but I have to write code to make small changes on the front end. Any solution to this?
For consumer-facing applications, I think I would say Fama or Adalo maybe. I think that would probably be the nearest. Appsmith is good for both front end and back end, but only for internal tools, because our UI is geared to be very simplistic and make it really easy for internal tool building. But if you really want to build a consumer application, I would say like, even Wix actually. So surprisingly, Wix also has a really good backend framework where you can actually go ahead and write a node backend inside Wix, as well as wire it up to your Wix front end. So Wix is also a pretty good tool for that.
Yeah, and there's something someone suggested to me, and I put it out in the chat. Is I know that Bubble, Adalo, these are good, but there's another one called Back for App that Adam introduced me to, and it's just like a headless CMS. It's like a headless backend, and literally you can connect to this backend using API. So you build your whole front end on no code, and then you connect to this backend using Back for App. So you get like a whole scalable backend with like billions of rows, and you still use no code.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
All right, I think that's about it. I think we have run out of time as well. Thank you so much, Nikhil, to show us what Appsmith is. I think I saw a lot of things which are different from Retool, and especially this focus on the developer community is, I'm pretty hopeful that's going to pay off. So really looking forward to where the product goes, and keep us updated on this. And thank you guys for joining. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks, Naz.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, take care. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.